Megan Hughes. The name had lived in quiet anxiety for weeks, whispered among friends, repeated by family, posted on local boards, and sent through texts that hoped for a reply that never came. She was a student, just 19, with plans that stretched beyond the campus, beyond her small hometown. Life for her had been ordinary, routine, full of lectures, coffee runs, and late-night study sessions. And then it stopped. It stopped somewhere along the way to Bridge 45. The water beneath it was calm that afternoon, reflecting sunlight like nothing had ever happened, hiding what it already held. It was the last place anyone imagined danger could linger. The kind of place people passed without thought, trusting it with a silence that would last far too long. Before we go any deeper, if stories like Megan's move you, if you believe every missing person deserves to be remembered and every life matters, then you already belong here. This is Adventure for Truth. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us as we uncover the stories the world almost forgot. It had been an ordinary day in her world. Classes ended. Friends walked to lunch. Cars passed over the bridge, unaware of the life that would soon vanish. Megan moved through her routine without interruption. Her laugh had filled halls. Her backpack had carried notebooks, pens, a carefully packed lunch. No one imagined that this would be the last time they would see her in the flow of ordinary life. Megan Hughes was not just a student. She was someone who dreamed, someone who loved, someone who was counted on to return home. She had plans. She had someone waiting for her. And yet, in the span of a few hours, she ceased to be present where she was expected. The call that never came. The footsteps that never returned. The messages that went unanswered. Questions began to accumulate before anyone realized the magnitude of what had happened. Where is Megan? Her car would eventually be found near Bridge 45, but at this moment, it had not been. There was no alarm from the environment. The bridge appeared ordinary, the river below calm. The world carried on above it, as it often does, blind to what lay beneath. And for those who knew her, the quiet was deafening. It was the kind of silence that presses into the chest, that makes minutes stretch into hours, and hours stretch into days. The absence of Megan Hughes was not marked by drama or spectacle. It was marked by the slow, patient disappearance of expectation, routine, and certainty. For now, she was just missing, and no one knew where to look first. The final hours of Megan Hughes's life unfolded without warning. She had left her dorm carrying her books and a laptop, ordinary items for an ordinary day. She had texted a friend about meeting later for coffee and checked in with her parents just as she always did. Nothing seemed unusual. No argument, no panic, no sign that the world was about to shift. Every small action suggested continuity, normalcy, until the moment it didn't. Her movements were traced meticulously by those trying to reconstruct the day. Class schedules, library check-ins, security cameras along campus streets. Each point confirmed that she had gone about her routine like any other student. And yet, somewhere between the end of her last class and her intended meeting, Megan simply disappeared from the world she knew. Her phone stopped responding. Her friends waited in cafes that she never arrived at. Small details, meaningless in isolation, began to take on a weight that no one was ready for. A backpack left slightly ajar in a hallway, a coffee cup still half full on a library table, a note scribbled on her planner about an assignment due the next week. These were ordinary, mundane traces, but now they became markers of absence, proof that her presence had ended abruptly, without explanation. The search began almost immediately. Parents called friends, friends called authorities. Police began checking her last known locations, retracing streets and sidewalks, parking lots and crosswalks, scanning for any hint of where she could have gone. Yet every street appeared unchanged. Every familiar landmark suggested she had simply evaporated, leaving only questions in her wake. The bridge near which her car would eventually be found was overlooked at first. It was a structure everyone knew, crossed daily, passed under without a second glance. The water beneath it seemed shallow in sunlight, calm, reflective. There was nothing in its ordinary rhythm to hint that it could conceal a disappearance. And so the focus of the search expanded outward. Roads she might have driven, parks she might have walked, friends' apartments she might have visited. But nothing connected. Days stretched into nights. Each unanswered phone call, each failed text, each unreturned inquiry added pressure, shaping fear into its own persistent presence. Megan's parents held on to hope, even as hope began to thin with every passing hour. Friends exchanged theories they didn't believe, desperate to fill in blanks that had no evidence. And all the while, the bridge remained unchanged. Its metal beams reflected the sky, its concrete anchored firmly to the riverbanks. The water below flowed quietly, swallowing sunlight and reflections alike, keeping its secret intact. It offered no hint, no evidence, no cry for help. The absence of Megan Hughes was not marked by dramatic signs. It was marked by subtle, ordinary details, the kind people overlook when they are looking for something extraordinary. And in those overlooked moments, the river waited, patient, still, and silent. Every investigation, every search, every anxious night was chasing the wrong direction. Megan had not gone far. She had not left clues elsewhere. The truth lay much closer than anyone imagined, hidden in plain sight, beneath a calm and unassuming surface that no one had yet considered dangerous. The river kept its secret, just as it would for days more, until the moment someone finally looked where no one had before. The investigation into Megan Hughes' disappearance quickly became a case of contradictions and blind spots. Authorities followed every lead, from campus friends to local streets, but each path ended with silence. Security footage confirmed her presence up until she left class, and her planned meetings were all missed. There were no witnesses to suggest she had left the area voluntarily. No signs of forced entry into a vehicle. No notes, no messages, no evidence of planning or intention. Each day without answers added layers of frustration for the family and those working the case. Search teams scoured the areas surrounding her dorm, nearby parks, and even wooded patches bordering the river near the town. Volunteers joined, canvassing streets and pathways, calling her name into empty spaces. Posters went up, social media posts circulated, each one a small spark of hope against the vast unknown. Yet the most obvious location, the bridge near where her car would ultimately be found, remained just another landmark. It had been passed over, assumed safe, assumed unremarkable. The bridge itself was deceptively ordinary. Its steel beams were weathered but sturdy, its sidewalks well worn by daily commuters. Water flowed beneath, shallow in some areas, darker in others, reflecting the sunlight in deceptive patterns. From above, it seemed to offer no refuge for anything hidden. Divers were called to check beneath the surface, but initial sweeps focused on edges and shallow sections, missing the deeper areas and nooks where debris or a vehicle could rest unseen. Weeks turned into months. Tips trickled in and fizzled out. Every tip was investigated, every possibility considered, but none produced progress. The case began to stagnate. Police meetings shifted from urgency to routine briefings, while the family felt the slow erosion of hope. Friends, once actively involved, grew distant as life pressed forward for everyone else, leaving Megan's absence suspended in a quiet limbo. And yet, the bridge, the place no one questioned, held the key. It was calm, controlled, trusted. It was unremarkable, unassuming, ordinary in every sense, which made it nearly invisible to the urgency of the investigation. It remained a silent witness, hiding what human eyes could not immediately detect. Every misstep, every overlooked angle, every assumption about safety created the conditions for the secret to persist. It was not negligence. It was ordinary perception, the way people see what they expect to see and miss what they cannot imagine. Megan's disappearance was shaping itself into a story that would only be resolved when routine was broken, when someone looked carefully enough, and when the river finally released its long-held secret. The investigation stalled, not from lack of effort, but from the deceptive clarity of what everyone thought they knew. The answers were there, just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to notice, and the silence of the bridge would continue to hold its secret, until the day that someone did. It was nearly 3 months after Megan Hughes vanished when the breakthrough came. Quietly, unexpectedly, almost by accident. A routine maintenance inspection had been scheduled at Bridge 45. Engineers needed to check the structural supports and the underwater foundation, lowering equipment and examining areas that had been inaccessible to search teams during the initial investigation. Water levels were temporarily reduced, exposing edges and nooks that had been hidden in shadow for weeks. It was a mundane operation, entirely unrelated to Megan's disappearance. Until it wasn't. One of the divers noted a subtle irregularity. Something unnatural lodged near the base of a support beam, partially concealed in a deeper current, where sunlight barely reached. At first, it appeared to be debris, a log, a crate, something the river had carried downstream. But its shape and positioning were wrong. It didn't shift with the flow. It didn't respond to the current the way floating objects did. The diver signaled for closer examination. The discovery was handled with precision. Authorities were called. The site was cordoned off. Specialists arrived, carefully documenting every detail. As the divers worked to move the object, the unmistakable outline of a car emerged, lodged securely, half-submerged and unseen for weeks. There was no chaos, no dramatic shouting. There was only slow, methodical realization. This car belonged to Megan Hughes. The weight of 20-plus days without progress now collided with the sudden clarity of discovery. The car, like the river itself, had been quiet, patient, and hidden in plain sight. It had not drifted far. It had not been taken. It had simply been missed, invisible in the places people had thought to search. The family arrived once identification was confirmed. Their reaction was muted by years of fear and hope deferred. Shock blended with grief, relief intertwined with sorrow. This was the moment they had waited for, even when waiting had seemed futile. They were finally able to see the answer, to touch the evidence of what had been hidden all along. Investigators worked carefully to understand how the car had ended up where it did. The depth, currents, and placement suggested it had been swept slightly from the edge of the bridge, then settled into a hidden nook of the river that had evaded previous searches. The discovery redefined the entire investigation. What had seemed impossible was in fact quietly present the whole time. The river, the bridge, and the car became characters in the story, silent witnesses to a disappearance, and finally, the means to uncover the truth. For the first time in weeks, Megan Hughes's presence was tangible. The ordinary river, trusted and overlooked, had kept its secret, and now it had returned it to those who had never stopped looking. The quiet of the bridge was broken, not with noise, but with acknowledgement. The case had shifted from missing to found, and nothing would ever be the same. The discovery of Megan Hughes's car near Bridge 45 brought clarity, but it did not erase the months of uncertainty, the nights spent awake, or the hollow absence that her family and friends had endured. It brought answers, simple, undeniable, and heavy. The questions of where were finally resolved. The questions of how and why would take longer. But for those who loved her, the proof of presence was everything. Investigators could now reconstruct the final moments, using the location of the vehicle and the patterns of the water to understand what had been hidden in plain sight. Nothing suggested foul intent from others. The river had simply kept her away from sight, holding her story under its surface until the right eyes looked carefully enough. What had been invisible for weeks became tangible evidence in a single quiet revelation. For Megan's family, the truth carried weight. Not relief, not celebration, but a shape for grief to take, a reality they could face, a reality that meant closure was finally possible. They could say goodbye properly, mourn fully, and finally anchor their memories not to uncertainty, but to fact. Her life, brief as it was, mattered, and now the world knew it had not simply disappeared. Stories like Megan Hughes's remind us that silence can be patient, water can hold secrets, time can stretch fear into decades of uncertainty, but truth eventually finds its way. It surfaces slowly, deliberately, and with the gravity of all that preceded it. If Megan's story moves you, if you believe that every missing person deserves to be remembered, then you are in the right place. Here, we honor the lives that vanish, the families that wait, and the truths that refuse to stay buried. Subscribe and stay with us, because every story matters, because every disappearance deserves a witness, and because the next story waiting beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered, might be the one you've been searching for all along. Don't miss it. Be here when the next secret comes to light.